Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Chesapeake Chat. Tonight we are going to be diving into the deep with the Department of Energy. I just want to thank the Department of Energy and the Bioenergy Technologies Office for their support of both First Chesapeake and FTC programs. Tonight we're joined by Josh Messner and Christy Sterner, and they are going to be sharing with us information about biofuels, maritime science, and how algae and all of these things work together so that you get a real picture of how this year's theme can be applied as you move into the workforce later after you're done with school. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Josh and take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelley. Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Messner, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of talk about what I do and talk about the importance of maritime decarbonization. But first, I just want to talk about who I am. I live in Denver, Colorado, grew up there my whole life. So the furthest I ever lived away from Denver is Fort Collins, which is when I went to school up at CSU or Colorado State University, where I studied chemical engineering, and I have an interdisciplinary study in biotechnology. If you're at all interested in the school, I put a QR code over there on the right side for admissions. It's a great school, great city, great state, great region to go to. So I encourage everybody to at least look at it. But from there, once I graduated, I shortly thereafter became part of the Bioenergy Technologies Office as a contractor. Actually, Christy hired me. She was my boss. So thank you, Christy. And that was about 18 years ago. And then about 5 years ago, I became a federal employee. And so that kind of gave me a little bit more leeway in planning and strategic planning for decarbonization through the use of biofuels. Specifically, I work in a group called the Systems Development and Integration group, which is a very fun name, also known as scaling up technology. So taking fuel producing technologies from a very small, like beaker size, cup size, we can't see my cup, but cup size scale, and then going all the way up to about 1 million gallon a year type facility. So how do you get to scale up those technologies? And so really exciting. And through that work, I started looking at all sorts of fuels, but really focused on maritime decarbonization. So I focused on how can you lessen the greenhouse gas emissions from any sort of boat or vessel through the use of biofuels. And then from there, I actually started embracing more than just biofuels and looking at how you can decarbonize through all sorts of means. So all different types of fuels, which I'm not going to talk about today because we're focusing on biofuels, but it's all very exciting work. So we'll go ahead and change to the next page. So why is maritime decarbonization important? About 1/3 of the U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions come from our transportation sector. A lot of those come from cars and trucks and things of that nature, but there's a small percentage that comes from maritime decarbonization. So about 4% of that, or about 1% of our total U.S. GHG emissions come from maritime. That seems like a small amount. However, it is very large. And if we're trying to completely decarbonize by 2050, which is our current goal, then we really need to look at all different sectors. And maritime is very difficult to decarbonize. You can't just electrify it. You can't just use hydrogen fuel cells, things like that. You really need to have other strategies to decarbonize it. It's also really important because about 80 to 90% of all the goods that you have in front of you, that you buy on eBay, that you buy at the store, come to the United States through shipping, through maritime. So it is really important to be able to look at that and help decarbonize that, not just for the US, but for the entire globe. Just a kind of a fun number is if the shipping industry were a country, it would be the 8th largest GHG emitter in the world, and that's growing. And so it is really important that we figure out strategies to decarbonize all these vessels that are on the water going forward. So with that, please go to the next one. So what are these types of vessels? So we're looking at reducing the full life cycle emissions from basically anything that floats, any boat. So these large ocean going vessels that a lot of people are very familiar with, the container ships, you can see one on the upper right there, tankers that are bringing bulk liquids to and from the United States, like oil. But in the future, we're hoping to utilize that for other decarbonized fuels, things like bulk carriers that transition or move grain, or like other bulk materials like steel to and from the United States, as well as cruise ships. Everybody likes going on cruises, and car carriers. So to get cars to the United States or from the United States elsewhere, you have to have these large ocean going vessels that really take a week or two on on the ocean, getting from location to location. We also want to look at basically commercial harbor crafts, so tugboats, ferries, offshore supply vessels, barges, all these fun things. We're also looking at those to how to decarbonize, and then recreational boats. So things like your speedboat, fishing boat, your personal watercrafts, like ski-doos and things like that. How do we decarbonize those effectively? Interestingly enough, there are about 12 million of those recreational boats on the water today, and we're not going to be putting batteries or hydrogen fuel cells in those boats. How do we do that? It's going to have to be through a drop-in biofuel, most likely. Next slide, please. All right, so what are the current fuels that we're using for each of these types of vessels? So for those large ocean-going vessels, they have really big engines or motors that are the size of your house, if not bigger. They use these basically bunker fuel or heavy fuel oil. It's really thick, dirty fuels that are utilized. Some of them also use liquid natural gas, but there's a very small portion of it. As you can see on the very far right there, that really dark black like oil essentially is the bunker fuel that these vessels burn. The other fuels that are used for like harbor crafts, mostly diesel. So you can see on the left side, diesel. And then for these recreational boats, it's mostly gasoline. And so we need to try to figure out replacements for all of these types of fuels and how we're going to do that. Next slide, please. So one way obviously is the easiest way to decarbonize is not to use as much fuel. So operational efficiencies we want to focus on. So slow steaming, i.e. slowing one of these vessels down, can really save a lot. You can have things like onboard carbon capture. You can change your propeller design so that they're more efficient. You can have wind assist. You can see the image on the upper right there. That's actually a bulk carrier that has some wind sails essentially that have been put on there. They can provide up to 10% efficiency or fuel reduction just by using those. Then you can also have other hull design characteristics that you can change, keeping your hulls clean. But that can only account for like roughly 40% emissions reductions. Then we need to start thinking about, all right, let's talk about fuel. So how can we reduce or replace these traditional fossil fuels? For the ocean-going vessels, we're really looking at biofuels as a large portion of that fuel replacement as a drop-in fuel. There's also some discussion about using methanol and ammonia, but those require new engines. So the biofuels can be used in these existing engines. Similarly, for harbor crafts, we're really looking at battery, electric, and fuel cell harbor crafts. But again, there's going to be a lot of legacy fleet out there that are not going to be able to get retrofit or purchase new. And so again, a drop-in biofuel really makes a lot of sense there. And then also with those recreational boats, just basically trying to fuel those 12 million boats. If we can have a drop-in biofuel or a green gasoline in there, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. Please, next slide. So again, what kind of biofuels are in use today? Because there are some that are in use today right now. So straight vegetable oil. So basically, if you have a bottle of canola oil or vegetable oil that's in your cabinet right now, you can put that into one of these large ocean-going vessels, and they do to use them to help decarbonize and make them a little cleaner. But there are obviously some disadvantages to just using vegetable oil, right? You can use biodiesels, which is kind of used vegetable oil that they do a little treatment on. Renewable diesels, which I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it, but it's a little bit more of a drop-in. Same with renewable natural gases. And then you can also put some various alcohols in there, so like ethanol, methanol, butanol. But then we're really looking at, all right, well, what can the next type of fuel be? What can these next biofuels look like? And a lot of these things are going to be these what we call biointermediates, so bio-oils and biocrudes made through various pathways. But just visually looking at them, if you see that right side there, the very far right, with that vial with that really icky, sticky fuel coming down, that is actual heavy fuel oil. So you can see that some of the products that we can produce look very similar. They have some advantages on viscosity. They're not as thick. So they have some operational advantages. So that's really what we're looking for to start replacing those heavy fuel oils with with biofuels for those large ocean-going vessels. And I'm going to skip over the renewable gasolines, the alcohols, because I really want to focus on these biointermediates for the next couple of slides. So how do you make those? One way is through hydrothermal liquefaction, we call it HTL because hydrothermal liquefaction is not fun to say. If you want, there's a QR code there, and there's about a 2-minute video. We're not going to play it right now, but I think these slides are going to be available for you, or you can do it right now as I'm talking. And you can look at that, and that's from our Pacific Northwest National Lab, talking about basically what hydrothermal liquefaction is. But essentially, you have a large pressure vessel that you increase the pressure, you increase the temperature to convert wet organic wastes into this biocrude. It really mimics how fossil fuels were made over millions and millions of years, but obviously it's a lot quicker, a few minutes, maybe a half hour versus those millions of years. To create that. So what am I talking about when I'm saying wet organic streams? That's okay, whatever. It's like manure. So a lot of cow manure in the United States, a lot of wastewater treatment facilities. So, you're flushing your toilet quite a bit. There's also a lot of like food production that sends things through wastewater treatment facilities. So a lot of those liquids we can utilize. And then what I think is going to get really interesting when Christy talks about it is going to be algae. So you can see that raceway on the right side there, where we're producing algal biomass that then can be utilized through this hydrothermal liquefaction process to produce some of these biocrudes. Next slide, please. So what does that even look like? All right, so you have all these little tiny microalgae cultures. I'm not sure what these are. I think Christy will probably be able to answer those, but there's a lot of like really small microbes in the algae that we can grow. So we can either do it in one of those raceways that we talked about, or you can see here on the bottom left where we have a flat panel bioreactor. Our photobioreactor, which gives a little bit more space for the photosynthesis to happen with the algae, and you get it to grow a little bit quicker. Then we take that and put it into one of these hydrothermal liquefaction units. The image there that's in the middle bottom is actually at our Pacific Northwest National Lab. So that's where we produce that biocrude that's on the upper right, following the arrow, to then say, all right, well, let's test this. So we have actually a gigantic test engine. I wish I had a picture. I'm about 1/3 the height of that engine block on the right side there. That's an ExxonMobil Enterprise engine that is at our Oak Ridge National Lab. It's about 1/10 the size of an engine that goes into one of those large ocean-going vessels, but it gives you a really good feel for what the characteristics of the fuels are going to do, how they react, what the combustion characteristics are, and are you actually doing what you're setting out to do, which is lowering the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's ultimately how we can get those algae on the upper left all the way down into that boat on the bottom right. Next slide, please. So anyway, that was really what I want to talk about for biofuels with maritime use. There's a lot of really cool things that are opportunities for young folks to come into the Department of Energy. So there's AAAS fellows, there's postgraduate. These are for after you graduate your college, but then there's some other ones for undergraduate type fellowships as well. So for ORISE, which is Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, I have a couple of links there, and then also the MEISPP partnerships, which are really great. That's for actually high schoolers and college age participants to come in. They say, hey, this is what we're interested in. Then all of the labs and all the DOE offices kind of go through and say, oh, you know what? This person has a really cool background, or they show interest in something that we really are interested in. And then we can start talking and get a summer internship through that means. So I have 3 different ways for, you to hopefully work with Department of Energy as you move through and try to figure out what the heck you're going to do in your life. You're at a really cool part of your education right now. So I would just say keep it up, and we're excited, and hopefully we can work together sometime. So I think we're going to do questions after Christy. So even though the next one says questions, don't worry about that. We'll get back to it. So thank you very much for letting me talk to you today.
Awesome. Well, that was awesome, Josh. Thank you. That's a tough act to follow, except that you opened it right up for what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about algae and biofuels and how that plays into the maritime and the ocean and the deep dive and the wonderful, exciting things that you guys are working on right now. So with that, I am Christy Sterner. I am a tech manager in the Bioenergy Technologies office, just like Josh is. And like he said, many years ago, I actually hired Josh, and we worked together in that capacity. And now we're both federal employees and tech managers and our peers in different areas of the same program office. So like Josh, I'm a Colorado native. I was born and raised here as well. So you probably have 2 of, 10,000 left maybe in the state. We have so many folks that move here that finding natives is not easy, and we are both Colorado natives. Now, the difference is that I went to a total engineering school. I almost said a nerd school. And us folks from mines, we say that because it's a true thing. I went to Colorado School of Mines, and my degree is in chemical engineering as well, like Josh. And I have an environmental minor, so I focused on environmental sciences, a lot to do with water, which makes a lot of sense given the algae things that I work on now. I have been with the Department of Energy since the beginning of time, it seems like, but I'm definitely a senior at it. I've been, I think, 24, 25 years, something like that. Yeah, since the beginning of time. So with that, as you can see on my slide, I am an algae enthusiast, but I am also a Pokemon enthusiast. So I had to put my Pokemon on here that are my Pokemon algae. They finally came out with them a couple years ago. So of course I include them on my slides because I'm like, you can have algae and technology and Pokemon all together in everything. So the things that I'm going to cover, I'm going to talk about algae and why I'm excited about algae and how that might factor into the exciting work that you are working on right now. And also about some opportunities and programs that I work on that I hope will be of exciting interest to you because they are focused on your where you are in school right now. It's a cool program that you can work with us to work on algae and other aspects, everything that's involved with algae, from growing it all the way through processing it, doing the hydrothermal liquefaction and things like that Josh mentioned in order to make the biofuels that go into those vessels. So I think it's a cool tie-in and a cool connection that Josh showed you the maritime stuff and how he's working on biofuels to go into all those ocean-going vessels and your recreation vessels. And you can make those exact fuels that he's talking about that decarbonize from algae. And truly, the nerd in me says, if you really think about it, where does petroleum come from anyway? So our millions-old petroleum that has been pressurized and turned into that thick, sloppy goo that you see is algae. We just do it a lot faster now. So with that, next slide, please. So real quick, kind of the not so exciting because there aren't a lot of pictures on here. What is the Bioenergy Technologies Office? So we focus on turning the carbon we have. So that's things like when you see a cornfield and you see all the corn cut off and you see those stalks sitting there, we take those stalks and we do cool things with them. We do the same thing with ag residues like wheat straw. And if you see that they're thinning out a forest, we take that waste stuff from those forests and we take pallets, waste pallets. You always see stacks of waste pallets, things like that. And we do something really useful with them. The same can be said for our tagline in algae. We say, we turn ick into awesome. Because people see algae and they go, ew, icky. Well, you can do some amazingly cool stuff with that icky stuff. The same can be said for trash. That's another thing. You probably never think about all the useful things that are in your trash. How much useful sugar there is in your trash, how much useful fats and waste there are in there, how many proteins there are in there. Really cool stuff that you don't ever look at your trash and think about that, but we do. And so we take that stuff, we process it through various technologies like hydrothermal liquefaction, and we make cool stuff like the biofuels that Josh is talking about. And on the algae side, I'm going to throw out there, we make a lot of cool stuff like surfboards and flip-flops, and you can make plastics. We make some jackets and some clothing from sports and outdoor enthusiast clothing lines that I'm sure you've heard of that I'm not going to tout by name here, but I can tell you that they make algae-based clothing. You can get shoes, running shoes and athletic shoes that are made from algae. So there's a lot of cool stuff that goes into algae. And on the really kind of cool environmental side, you can also make protein-rich things that the world needs, such as food and feed for animals and humans. So lots and lots of benefits. And in case you can't tell, I'm kind of an algae cheerleader. That's my thing. I'm very passionate about it. And so I hope as I go through the slides, you guys are passionate about this too. This next slide, please. So what are the benefits of algae? Well, as you can see from the cool slides, one, it's very pretty, in my opinion. There are lots of really pretty algae out there, and you can do really cool things with them. That top right picture is an algae pond. That's a 2-acre algae pond. And it's kind of hard to visualize the scale of these things until you actually see one and you look at that and you go, that kind of looks like a stream or a wide ditch or something like that. That's not. That's a 2-acre algae pond. They're very big. there's a lot of algae in there, and there's a lot we can do with it. The really cool picture down below that I think would interest a lot of you with all the ocean work that's going on is that's a macroalgae. That's sea kelp or seaweed. And there's just an expanding boom of business in the United States relative to macroalgae. So we have focused significantly on microalgae for the last 10 to 12 years. And now with this insurgent of how can we bring the US up to speed and get them to be more of a world player in the macroalgae space, there's a lot more research going on in the macroalgae space. And personally, I think it's cool. I mean, you can't really see it from that little tiny picture, but if you were to stretch out one of those seaweeds or one of the kelps and look at it, it's a very, very beautiful plant. So, sea plant. The other cool things about algae is that it's not in competition with food. I mean, obviously, when you look at your pool, you don't say, oh, yum, let's just scrape all that off and make some food with it. Nobody does that. So algae is not in competition with food. There are algae, obviously, macroalgae, seaweeds that are edible. We aren't looking at those. So we're not looking at the stuff that you can eat as food because there are so many other species out there that are not like that. So we don't compete with food on either the micro or macroalgae. Josh talked a lot about decarbonization. Well, excuse me, it's a little dry. Decarbonation is removing CO2 from the atmosphere and from the processes in our world that make that CO2 and emit it into the air. And so what's really cool about algae is you need CO2 to grow. So what a perfect natural biological way to take up CO2 and take it out of these systems. You can't grow the algae without it. So it's awesome for decarbonization. Then also, a lot of the processes we do reduce greenhouse gases. So they can make that biofuel and they can make it to where it emits less greenhouse gases than petroleum. So it has a lot of benefits. The other thing is you don't think about the size of algae. Algae is really, really small, microalgae. And so you can grow a lot of it in that space. I can tell you that there are millions, possibly tens of millions of algae in that long 2-acre pond. Lots of it. So it grows fast. It grows if you compare the amount you get for the space you're growing it in, the ratio is great. So there's lots of good benefits. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is kind of a more technical slide, so not quite as fun, but the cool colors tell you that what I was talking about with the macroalgae, we're trying to increase that in the US. So macroalgae mainly has been a food. Seaweed has been. In other parts of the world, you can get some really yummy stuff that's wrapped in algae, in seaweed, and all kinds of nutrients that are put into vitamins and things like that. In fact, you'd be surprised. There are fruit drinks and sodas and all kinds of stuff that have algae in them that you probably never even knew were there. So yeah, it's in a lot of stuff, but it's usually not on the seaweed side, on the macroalgae side around the US. It's usually grown and handled elsewhere. So in an attempt to get the US more involved in that and utilize the space that we have in our oceans to do that, our Billion Ton 23, that's what BT23 stands for, our Billion Ton study looked at what is the potential to grow macroalgae around the United States. And as you can see by those big numbers, the 293 kilometers squared in Alaska, Pacific, and the Atlantic coastal regions, there's a lot of space out there in the ocean for macroalgae research and to grow macroalgae. And in fact, as we go on in this presentation, I'll show you some really cool stuff that's going on by people, students, educators, and kids your age that are doing exactly this, that are going to make the difference in this industry. Next slide, please. See, I love this slide. So this is cool, really quick and easy. I believe that's sargassum. That is a macroalgae. There are lots of blooms. A lot of times these are not considered your truly harmful blooms, but this is kind of a nuisance bloom because sargassum grows very, very well. Particularly, you'll see wash-ups like this on the beaches of Puerto Rico and places like that where they get these massive sargassum blooms every year. And we want to know, what can we do with that? Because, of course, we don't want it to just sit there because, of course, it starts to rot and then it's kind of pretty smelly as it starts to rot. And it just makes it, you don't want to go sit on the beach and hang out with a bunch of smelly seaweed. So there's very, very cool things you can do with sargassum. And one of them is, obviously, you can make biofuels for those maritime vessels that Josh was talking about. So we spend a lot of time researching how do we collect this stuff? How do we get the sand out of it? And then how do we process it to get the useful things that are inside of it out for us to use? Next slide, please. This one is cool and probably something I hadn't thought about before I'm presenting, but there is a technology system out there called a turf scrubber. Personally, I love the name. Turf scrubber just sounds cool. It sounds fun. And they're super inexpensive to make. In fact, you could probably make a turf scrubber from stuff you could buy at Home Depot, which I think is very cool. But what they use turf scrubbers for is it's a natural system. You install it in and you let the waters of a system flow through it before it discharges into your lakes and oceans. And it actually pulls the excess nutrients from that water so that you don't get harmful algal blooms. You don't get depletion of the good stuff that water system needs for the fish and the plants to grow. It pulls all that out before it ever discharges into those systems. Excuse me. The picture on the right shows energy cane. Energy cane is an energy crop and is very, very useful for preventing the same things, preventing those additional nutrients from flowing into the water systems. Now going back to a lot of the other cool stuff you can make, I had to put a picture of the surfboard on here. I just think that's very, very cool that you can make surfboards from algae. And there are quite a few out there. And there's the flip-flops and surf shoes that are also made with that same algae. So if you have any interest in that, I highly encourage you to go to UC San Diego's website. There's a lot of stuff on there about the research they did to make those surfboards. And they are available. They are a product that people can pick up and use and try, and it's very, very cool. Some of the other pictures on this slide show you that algae is in a lot of stuff that you probably didn't think about. So it is in a lot of food products. And these ones are kind of obviously, green machine, and it's green, and it looks like algae. You can probably guess it has algae in it. But I promise you, if you start looking at your labels, you're going to find algae and stuff that you never, ever would have thought algae would be in. And the nice thing is people usually think it either has a very strong sea kind of fishy smell. It doesn't. You can do lots of things with it that take that smell away. And a lot of algae doesn't smell like that anyway. So it's very, very cool in a lot of stuff. So I encourage you the next time you're looking at, I don't know, it's maybe not toothpaste, but there are other things, lotions and different oils or different things that you can cook with. Look at them and see, and I bet you'd be surprised how many of them actually have algae in them. Next slide, please. Now I get to talk about things that I hope will really excite you and that I will hear more from you about after this presentation and as we go on. I am the manager of this project. This is the Algae Technology Education Consortium. This is an amazing project that it's focused solely on algae curriculum for various jobs and careers out there in the algae field. So there are a lot of challenges right now with processing algae to these various products. And so there's so much room for innovation and for great ideas. And algae is so diverse that there is no, in my opinion, there is no idea out there that is too crazy or too wild or too unthinkable to do, because there's so much you can do with it. And that's what ATEC does. They take industry experts and educators from around the country. They get together and they develop curriculum for students all the way from kindergarten through postgraduate. So there's degrees and certificates and all kinds of amazing things that ATEC does that is available to all of you. And I thought this slide was cool because it just shows all the kind of cool pictures and cool things that they do. I'm going to talk a lot more about Algae Prize, which you see up in the top left corner. But I kind of want to focus on, there's something here that you guys are kind of getting the pre-notice about. There's something coming out called Phycoverse. It's going to be a game. It's going to be amazing. The one you see down in the bottom kind of center is an actual algae pond. And it's a draw-up, mock-up of an algae pond that is available that folks can use. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Algae Academy, which you see in the bottom right. And even though that's a graph, the Algae Academy is something that you and your classmates in your schools can get involved in right now, and it's free. And it's an amazing, amazing thing to do. I'd also point out that ATEC offers a lot of online curriculum for all age groups, and that curriculum is also free. So there's lots out there that you can do to get excited and get involved in algae. that doesn't cost anything and that can get you credentials and credits and grades and certificates and all kinds of cool stuff that help you through your career. So I'd also point out too, algae is not limited to doing these things about growing algae in ponds. I mean, there's so many other things you can do. There's processing it, there's gathering it, cultivating it, making new things out of it, extracting the good stuff out of it, like proteins and fats and sugars. And so there's so many associated industries with algae that you can look into the curriculum, and your education and your careers can go any direction from that. So next slide, please. This is kind of the boring slide because it's all text, but it just shows you how many things ATEC does. There are so many amazing programs within ATEC, and the curriculum and the different programs that they have worked on have spanned across not only the US, but countries around the world. There's so much interest in this. There's so many good programs. These folks are amazing. They're all open and available to talk with students. They want to hear back from students. There's a digital badging program that they have. So for example, say you take one of their courses and you can get a badge for it. There are certain careers and school programs out there once you go beyond high school that those credentials can get you further in your career. They can get you raises, they can get you promotions, and they can get you into the stepping stones into furthering your career. So those badges are developed by the industry, by things that the industry is looking for. For example, if you're super, super good at looking at things in a microscope, which you probably think, hey, microscopes are cool, anybody can do that. Actually, not anybody can do that. So it's actually a really, really good skill set. And so there's a whole curriculum, a course, and a certificate based on how well you do things with a microscope. And that's actually a very sellable quality going forward in a career. So there's awesome stuff in there. And you'll see again, the Algae Academy is listed. That is STEM education for K through 12. And I want to just talk briefly a bit more about that because it's awesome. And I highly, highly encourage all of you to sign up for it and call and get one of these kits to your class. I'm not sure if the next slide talks about the Academy or not. Yes. So this part that you can read about and go and look about this is available on the BETO website, but it's also available on the ATEC website. This is awesome. So the Algae Academy has these kits, and I know you can't see my hands, but they're big kits. And these kits are free of charge to your class. They come with everything you need in them to learn how to grow algae. It teaches you not only how to grow them, but how you feed them, what they eat, how to process them, how to keep them happy and healthy, and then how to count how productive your system is. You know, how much algae did you actually grow? It talks about how you would process it going forward. It shows you when the algae are healthy and when they're not. And you do all of this in your classroom. During the pandemic, during COVID, you could get one of these kits and you could do it at home. So, I mean, there's lots and lots of cool stuff within this kit that show you how easy it is to grow algae and how easy it is to do the technologies and the mathematics and all that kind of stuff around them so that you know what you grew and why you grew it and what you can do with it. So super, super exciting program. I can't even tell you, if I remember right, they have sent out over 120,000 kits. And again, like I said, they're free. So if you and your class are interested at all in getting one of these kits and trying it, highly encourage you to go to the website, look up the Algae Academy, and I believe there's a form on there where you just fill it out and they'll send you a kit. Very, very cool program. Next slide, please. Now for my baby. This is like my algae baby. So, Algae Prize. Algae Prize is run by the Bioenergy Technologies Office. It is our prize program that looks solely at research for algae. However, like I said, there's so many things involved in the pathway of taking algae from growing it to processing it and making something like a surfboard that we're looking for cool, new, unique, and fresh ideas along that entire value chain. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking about algae and you're thinking, you know, I wonder if you could do X, Y, and Z with algae. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for those new, fresh ideas that maybe somebody hasn't thought of, or maybe somebody thought, nah, that's too easy, or no, that's too hard, or I'm sure somebody else thought of that. Well, maybe somebody did, but they didn't promote it and they didn't propose it with an algae prize, and they should have, because that's what we want. We want these cool, new, unique, and exciting ideas with an algae prize. The algae prize is open to high school through postdoc. So it is more limited on the age range. We are thinking and looking into possibly doing an algae prize for younger folks, but for right now, it's high school through postdoc. You have to be in a US-based school to participate, but it is so fun and so amazing. I highly encourage everybody to look into it. Next slide goes into a lot more detail about what it is. So we have 3 areas. Like I said, we look at everything within the algae chain. So we look at everything from growing it to how can you optimize your system. You know, like I talked about turf scrubbers. I talked about open ponds. When you saw that 2-acre pond, that's an open pond cultivation system. Josh's slide showed you those really cool flat panel photobioreactors that ASU has. Those are awesome, by the way. Very cool as well. So you can look at everything from redesigning or optimizing those systems through harvesting and dewatering, because as you imagine, algae's grown in water. So to process it, you need to remove that water. There's a lot of research that is ongoing and still needs to be done on how to do that. And then we can go into new products. Algae has everything in it. It has sugar, it has fats and oils, it has protein, it has lots of vitamins. There's just so many good things about it. And we can extract those items out and make umpteen products from it. The world is wide open to what you can make with algae. So our third area focuses on what else can we make with it and how do we do that? Now, part of the challenge of working with algae is, of course, you get contamination. It's a biological system. It's a live growing system. So lots of things like to eat algae. You know, maybe we wouldn't eat it directly, but there's lots of things that would. So a lot of what we need to study is how do we handle that? How do we deal with it? And how do we make our systems the most productive we can without letting them crash from all these other things that like to eat them? So very, very cool stuff that you can do with algae throughout this whole process. And Algae Prize wants new innovative ideas in the entire chain. So you have, basically it's wide open on what you could do here. This next slide, please. So for example, we have right now, we have Algae Prize 2 is underway and headed to their Algae Prize weekend, which is the big competition weekend that we do in April on the National Renewable Energy Laboratory campus, which is also an awesome place to do something like this. Every Algae Prize has 15 student teams, and the student teams can be anywhere from 2 students to 20 students if you wanted. They can be spread out across the country. They just have to be U.S. teams. They have to be high school age through postdoc. So, you know, there are plenty of teams that have 2 or 3 high school students mixed in with some graduate level students, with some undergrads. We have full high school teams. We have full undergraduate teams. And then, of course, we have full postdoc teams. So really, it's all within there. And a lot of our current finalist teams are mixed, meaning that they have a high school and a college and some postdoc students. So it brings a lot of schools together. It gives you lots of opportunities. We've even had teams that had students from across the country. So they had 2 students working on it in California and 2 students working on it in Florida, and they were one team. So lots of opportunity. You don't have to be from the same school. You don't have to live in the same part of the country. You just have to be able to coordinate and do your research together, whether that's sharing data and information or sharing algae or whatever you need to do to make it happen. But the teams are wide open to how you want to best structure your team. So those teams apply. The 15 teams selected get $10,000 per team as the first round of prize money, because the Algae Prize has multiple prize rounds. Those 15 teams then have a year to do the proposed project, whatever they propose to do. Excuse me. And then they come together for Algae Prize weekend. And on Algae Prize weekend, you present your project and your results in a professional manner to a team of reviewers that are based in the industry. So you get to network and work with folks that are doing this for a living right now, which is awesome if you want to make contacts to further your career in this. And you present to them at that point, they select the 5 top teams as the champions, and those champion teams get an additional $10,000. And then we have a Q&A session with that same review panel. The top 5 teams go in cold to a review session with those reviewers, and we select the grand champion. The grand champion team gets an additional $15,000. So the best thing about the weekend, and I think the thing that you would enjoy the most, is that you get to interact with your peers, you get to interact with the other teams, you get to hear what the other teams did, but most importantly, there are lots of folks from the industry there. And so you get a chance to meet them, talk to them, learn about what they do, make good contacts, and just see all the cool stuff there is to do out there with the algae field. So highly, highly encourage you, if you're interested at all, to sign up for an Algae Prize team. I can tell you we don't have any announcements out yet, but we are planning for an Algae Prize 3, and we do hope to have Algae Prize 3 announced and out and open early sometime next calendar year. Don't have any dates, don't have anything official, but that is the plan. So please, please watch for that. Next slide, please. And I know I'm running out of time. I've probably overtalked anyway. I just wanted to point out to you on the oceanside macroalgae. As you can see, these are the 5 champion teams from the first round of Algae Prize. And that top right corner, the champion team was Kelp, I Need Some Algae, which is an awesome name. But their entire research project was based on kelp and about how to harvest and cultivate algae, seaweed. And so they were studying the different type of string that you use and how to make that sustainable and reusable, because currently it is not. And so they came up with some awesome ideas and did a great research project on it, and they won. So it was absolutely amazing. As you can see, we get teams from Puerto Rico. Also amazing. I think it's Algae Rhythm there was a full high school team. These are full high school teams competing right along with students from Ivy League schools, from universities and colleges across the U.S. So anybody can do this. Anybody can participate and compete with anybody else across the U.S. It's fantastic. It's an awesome, awesome opportunity. Next slide, please. I wanted to point out real quick, that isn't all we do. We don't just do algae. We don't just do maritime. We have some amazing STEM resources within the Bioenergy Technologies office. This is also a web page on our site. So when you go to the Bioenergy Technologies site, there's a wealth of information there. Highly encourage folks to check on the STEM stuff, because there's so many ways to work with us and so many ways to get involved and to just explore what you might be interested in the bioenergy field. There's also, once you look at that, you'll realize that there are websites like this for every type of technology out there. So if you're interested in wind and solar, even though I'm not plugging those at the moment, those are available as well. Just highly encourage you to go to the websites and see what opportunities there are within STEM for you to participate. And that goes right into the next slide, which is the career map. So there are many, many careers, as I talked about earlier, within the bioenergy space. It's not just limited to biofuels. It's not limited to algae. It's not limited to how do I get the corn stover out of the field after I harvest the corn. It's wide open to lab research, to in the field, or like Josh said, to scaling up to millions of gallons per year. So there's so many opportunities in the technologies involved in bioenergy. So you can click on this, you can explore the opportunities that are out there, what fields are out there, what curriculum is out there. And then, of course, by all means, contact us. We're happy to help you. We're happy to put you in touch with people that can answer your questions and help you. Next slide. I think that's it. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate this opportunity and happy to answer any questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Christy and Josh. There was so much information that you guys shared about how your industries are applicable to our theme for this season. I'm just so thankful. I had no idea the volume of resources and activities that are available for students in both high school and as they move out of K-12 into college. So that was just tremendous. Thank you so much. I do want to open it up. If anyone's watching and they have a question for Christy or Josh, please just drop it in the chat and our moderator will get those over to us. One question that I have while we wait to see if any come in from an audience. Oh, we already have one from the audience. Oh my. Has there been any noticeable variance in algae yield per year with these more intense weather events in recent years? Good question, James.
That is a great question. That's a really good question. And of course, there has. And that is one of the things that we're trying to address, because as you can imagine, if you have a big rainstorm and you dilute those algae systems, then now you've changed your media content, you've changed how much sunlight can penetrate those systems and feed into the algae. And so you've affected your photosynthesis, you've affected whether the algae have enough nutrients to eat and grow and be productive. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. Plus, of course, you can get contaminants. And so with a lot of these weather events, you see a lot more harmful algal blooms, which you read about in the news. So the exciting thing that I can tell you about that, as far as these weather events causing things like harmful algal blooms or causing dilutions, is that there's so much research going into that we actually are seeing companies and universities and other folks that are coming up with ways to capture those harmful algal blooms, handle them, and make good products out of them. So we can actually take something that make people go, you can't swim there, you're going to get sick, they're deadly, they're poisonous, they're toxic. Yes, they are. But there are ways to take those things. We're not going to bury them in the ground. We certainly are not going to bury them in the ocean. We're going to take them and do something good with them. And that's just part of the research that's available out there and that is really taking shape. So awesome question. Thank you.
So one question that I had was, if I am a student in high school and I'm thinking about my future, are there any classes that I should be taking while I'm in school in preparation for going into one of these industries?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of biology, a lot of microbiologies that you can take at the high school level. Certainly math, even though we're not getting into like calculus and differential equations on a daily basis by any means. It's not what our particular jobs are about, but it's good to have a good understanding of how things are derived and things like that. So really any science-based technology, whether, type classes are really important to really understand that type of thing. And more importantly, too, to understand if you as a student are really interested in that, right? Both Chrissy and I are chemical engineers. If you don't like chemistry or you don't like math, I don't know if I would recommend it for you. It's a pretty tough workload for sure. So really understanding like, all right, well, this is the type of science that I'm really looking at investigating. I think with first, I think you probably have a lot of mechanical engineers, maybe some robotics folks too. So like maybe taking some of those type of math classes, because there's just a lot of math when you're talking about engineering, to make sure they understand how strong something is, how you can get electricity from one panel to another panel, that sort of thing are really important. So.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Oh, looks like we have another one from James. What are some of the biggest factors inhibiting these biofuels from seeing mass adoption? Are they related to processing costs, a supply issue, or is there an efficiency trade-off?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and Christy, you can maybe back me up on some of it, but certainly cost is a big item. It's just simply more expensive to do this. If it weren't, then fossil fuels wouldn't be the number one fuel. We would be going to the cheaper fuel. So it is definitely an expense, but you need to think of cost as more than just money. You need to look at the cost of what it's going to our environment, how it's going to affect all of the the climate change, things of that nature. And so really need to take into account all of the costs that you can affect that. And then they start becoming a lot more reasonable in that fashion. Also, one thing that we love to talk about in the Bioenergy Technologies Office is solids handling. So getting that corn stover, those stalks reduced in size and then put into a pressurized conversion unit, turns out it's really, really hard. Like really hard. We're still trying to figure that out. There have been so many technologies that have basically fallen by the wayside because they cannot do that seemingly simple task And that's one of the harder things to do. That's why algae is really good feedstock, because you don't have to go through those solids. It's already an aqueous solution that you can put into these hydrothermal liquefaction units and go from there. And so it's really just, getting the R&D costs paid for, and then being able to reduce some of those monetary costs. Although, again, like the costs of other aspects and risks are much higher. So.
Yep, and I would add to that, not only those are excellent questions. You talked about supply issue. That's the cool thing about what came out with the 1 billion ton study that we did. So the idea was, is there 1 billion tons of these feedstocks available to process into biofuels? And the answer is yes. In fact, there's a lot more of it. And that's because there are a lot of biomass and waste feedstocks that you don't think about, when you're driving down the road and you see these different fields and you see like that, the corn stalks that are left after the corn has been removed, or you see the little corners where different crops are growing that are not necessarily the corn, or even like that, you look at the forests and all the undergrowth there is there. And for us in Colorado, the pine beetle kill and all of that kind of stuff, all of that stuff can be processed. All of that stuff is good feedstock. And part of the cost is being able to collect it. There's a lot of research going into how do we economically and sustainably collect those feedstocks to reach that 1 billion ton goal. And is it even fathomable that we can do that? Does it make sense to do that? And I say, yes, it is. And that's what that research is about how do we utilize, captivate, collect, and utilize those feedstocks and then take it further. And so, yes, it is a supply issue in the fact that we have to get them, but that feedstock's out there. Your trash that you throw away beyond recyclables, it's out there and it's usable. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with this, but the waste trap grease from places like McDonald's and fast food chains and everything like that, that is actually being captured and is used to make diesel to put into your cars. And so you probably don't think about that. You're cruising around on McDonald's French fries grease, but you could be. So it is very possible.
Yeah, I think, and maybe even further, there are biofuels on the market right now. There's 16 billion gallons of ethanol that's on the market that are in almost everybody's car, like right now, today.
Right now.
So we're talking about the next generation of these fuels that we have to learn and get there. Ethanol wasn't, a top commodity like it is today overnight, and neither was the use of fossil fuels, right? I mean, they've had 150 years head start. So we're trying.
Yeah. And those prices go down. The more we learn about them, the more we grow and utilize them, and the more we're able to meet the technological challenges like Josh talked about being able to feed them into these processing systems. The more that we can do that, the more we can scale, the lower those prices go and make us compatible and can compete with petroleum, which is the goal here, of course. Definitely doable. There is an energy trade-off on some of them. I mean, if you wanted to look at the energy trade-off, when you see folks that have hybrid vehicles on using the ethanol versus the gasoline, there is, but at the price points, it doesn't make that big of a difference. So,
and a lot of like the biodiesels and the renewable diesels, and even like some of the new green gasolines, those are ASTM like identical molecules essentially. So like they are pure drop-ins with the same energy content as everything. So you're not losing that 10-15% like you're losing from ethanol. They're true drop-ins in that respect. So you're going the same distance. And we can get into it, but sustainable aviation fuel, there are some molecules that you can use that are actually more energy dense than the current fuels that are used, which means by putting the same volume of fuel in an aircraft, you can go 2, 3, 4% further, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you've just opened up a whole heck of a lot of airplanes going to a lot more destinations by doing so.
Wow. That is just so fascinating. I love too, when you guys were talking about all the educational resources that are out there and the different competitions and things like that for our students, because in FIRST, that's essentially what we do, right? We use our themes and robots in an effort to build skills and build talent and explore topics. And this idea that our students would have access to resources at the BETO website and the Department of Energy's website where they could participate in other contests and other prizes and those types of things where they can delve into a new topic, a different topic than what maybe they would have been used to is really great. Do we have any other questions? I do want to just be mindful of that as we wrap up. Oh, okay. I just want to thank everyone for attending. And I'm just so thankful for, sorry, I can't do two things at once. You'll have to forgive me. I have to pause.
Can I add in one quick comment?
Please. Yes.
I was thinking about the robotics aspect, and I was thinking, they do some really cool robotic stuff on the biological side, because we have to do these systems where you need to be able to scan very quickly what you have in your system. And so they do these sorters and kind of like these imaging shots of different algae cells and things within there that require robotics, because you add in contaminations if you have people touching them. Mm-hmm. So they do them with robotics. Plus, the coolest thing is that they are looking at autonomous sea-going vessels, ocean-going vessels that you can actually use to help grow, harvest, and cultivate macroalgae in the ocean. And these vessels are so awesome. They have come so far. So there's lots of cool stuff that you can do in these fields with robotics.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Well, I want to thank Josh and Christy for coming out this evening and sharing all of this wealth of information with our community and our students. To those of you who are watching, we have recorded this and we'll make this available on the First Chesapeake YouTube channel. And the slides will also be available with the links and the various things that are inside those with the QR codes will be available in our public drive for mentors and coaches to access for their team members. So I can't thank BETO enough for their support of First Chesapeake and for our FTC programs, as well as bringing this great information to us. So thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Take care.